Good afternoon, sir. Can you see and hear us?
Yes, thank you.
We're hearing from Ms. Park.
Yeah.
If you'd like to repeat after me, I do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you.
Please could you state your full name?
Melanie Jane Park.
Ms. Park, as you know, my name is Sam Stevens and I ask questions on behalf of the inquiry. First, can I thank you for producing a written statement today, and secondly, for attending the inquiry to give oral evidence. I want to turn first to that statement, which should be in front of you in a bundle of documents. Could I ask you to turn that up, please?
Mm-hmm.
And just confirm that's your statement of the 22nd of August 2024.
Yes, it is.
Now, before we go any further, there's one correction I understand you wish to make. That's at paragraph 162, please, which is page 71 of the statement. That will come up on this screen as well. I'll just wait for it. Now, what I'll do is provide a summary of what I think the correction is, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down, there's a sentence that reads, the cost of a given ARQ request corresponds with the length of period being requested. For example, ARQ data for a 6-month period will cost more than a request for a 3-month period. My understanding is when you signed that, you understood that to be correct on the basis of information from subject matter experts. You now understand that that isn't correct. You wish to strike it out of the statement, and it is dealt with by the evidence of another post office witness.
That's correct, yes.
Correct. So, so the highlighted text should be struck out of the witness statement effectively.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Could we please then, the statement can come down from the screen, but could we please turn to page 101 of the statement? Do you see a signature?
I do, yes.
Is it your signature?
It is.
And are the contents of that statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
They are, yes.
Thank you, Ms. Park. That statement, now stands as your evidence in this inquiry. It will be published on the inquiry website shortly. For the record, the unique reference number is WITN 116000100. I'm going to ask you some questions about it, but not every aspect of what is a very detailed statement. I'll start with similar questions to what I did this morning. You have been chosen by Post Office to act as a witness to give evidence on its behalf in response to parts of 2 Rule 9 requests sent to it. Is that right?
That's correct.
You are the Central Operations Director to the Post Office.
I am.
When did you join the Post Office?
17th of October 2022, so 2 years tomorrow.
And have you had any other role at the Post Office?
No, I haven't.
Very briefly, could I just ask you to give an overview of your career before joining the Post Office?
Mm-hmm. I qualified as a chartered accountant in 1997 with KPMG, following which I moved to Boots the Chemist in December 1997, where I stayed for 24 years. So I started out doing various financial roles, both pure financial accounting and more business partnering latterly, and then moved into a more operational role, and then was the head of retail operations before I left.
In terms of your reporting line, I understand that you report to Neil Brocklehurst, the Interim Chief Operating Officer.
I do, yes.
And just in broad terms, could you summarise your role and responsibilities at the Post Office?
Yes, I have a number of quite different responsibilities. The first of which is I have responsibility for the branch support centre. So the team up in Chesterfield that are responsible for supporting postmasters with a number of different matters. We have a team of about 50 people up there. That's the branch support centre. I also have responsibility for the network reconciliation and support team. And they're responsible for understanding any discrepancies as a result of proactive comparison of third-party data and issuing transaction corrections should they need to once they've been investigated. They also have the network monitoring team as well, and their role is to, again, proactively look for branches that might not be following operational processes as we would like, and which may suggest they are struggling with those processes, and try and intervene before those processes lead to potential discrepancies, as we've heard this morning. I'm also responsible for the network support and resolution team, and they are the team that help postmasters with the review of discrepancies. So should a postmaster use review or dispute, and it can't be fixed through a call into the branch support centre, they will be the team that review the discrepancy and ultimately agree the resolution with the postmaster.
Presumably you received a formal induction when you joined the post office.
Yes, I did. I had 6 weeks where I wasn't part of my role. I was travelling around the various functions within post office, so the commercial functions, the rest of the retail functions, to really try and understand the role that I was being brought in to do.
Was there any discussion as part of your induction on the findings by Mr Justice Fraser, as he then was, in the group litigation?
Not formally. I think when I knew I'd taken a role at the post office, I made it my business to start doing some research and looking into it. And then I did get a number of documents when I first came to read through. And then I've attended the inquiry on a number of occasions to try and understand in a bit more detail the impact that on postmasters, such that it would help me do my role more effectively.
I want to look at branch assurance and audits. Could we look, please, at your statement, page 14, paragraph 38. You say the inquiry has used the term audits in relation to a set of questions. Post Office does not carry out audits on branches. The branch assurance team attend a branch to count physical cash and stock and establish whether that agrees with what is recorded in Horizon. That process before was known as an audit in Post Office, wasn't it?
It was, yes.
Is it not effectively describing what an audit is in any event?
I don't believe so. So in my experience as both an external auditor and an internal auditor, particularly external audit, you're looking at accounts, trying to understand the validity of the data in those accounts. This is different. This is simply a stock take, in effect. So what we're doing is assuring the physical value of the cash and stock and cash equivalents in that branch and comparing it to what the system thinks as any other retailer would do on their annual stock takes.
So your view, this is just correcting essentially incorrect terminology from...
Yes, it's assuring the physical value as it stands at that point in time.
Page 20, please, of your statement, paragraph 53. It's a point on feedback about branch audits. You say that during a visit, the lead assurance advisor will give the postmaster a branch assurance visit findings letter. And you go on to say that the form also gives postmasters an opportunity to give feedback on the branch assurance visit and their experience with the team. In July 2024, 34 branch assurance visits were completed and 14 responses were received to that feedback request. Of these 14 responses, 12 were ranked as excellent, 1 was ranked as very good, and one was ranked as good. That's July 2024. How does, from your experience, how does that stack up to other months? Is that about average for the results, or better or worse?
I think given that this feedback form was only introduced in June this year, I believe, I think it's actually probably a better response than we would generally see when we...
Sorry, can I just check? That's my fault for asking the question. When you say better response, do you mean the number of responses you get back to the question, or the actual, whether there's satisfactory...
In terms of the number of responses that we've had since, and we've had some updated figures, and they actually show a much improved response rate. So we are getting a significantly increased response rate if we look versus what we see in other areas. And I think it's important because this could be quite an emotive area, and it's important that we seek feedback and get feedback and act on that feedback.
So you've noticed more responses. Is there any difference to the ranking? So here it's 12 ranked as excellent, 1 as very good, 1 as good. Is it about the same proportions, or are they different?
I think they've slightly improved. From my recollection, I think we've received more excellent, and then probably 1 or 2 good and very good. But they are definitely there are definitely more excellent than this data.
Could we look, please, at EXPG 607? This is the YouGov survey that was commissioned by the inquiry. Have you had the chance to review this? Could we turn, please, to page 32? We see it says branch audits. It's referring to the same thing, the assurance, branch assurance. And it says since January 2020, just over 3 in 4 postmasters surveyed said that their branch has not received an audit. 12% reported that they have received an audit. So of those who have received an audit, this is the third paragraph, since January 2020, were more likely to be satisfied than dissatisfied with how it was conducted. Over half were satisfied, compared with around 1 in 5 who were dissatisfied. So it appears to be a difference here in that there are some people expressing to the YouGov survey dissatisfaction with branch assurance. Would you agree?
Yes.
Are there in place any plans within Post Office to investigate why there might be a difference between the results of the YouGov survey and the results you're obtaining through the feedback forms?
I think we have to look at the current process. I think Ms Marshall referred earlier, without understanding the detail of the people who completed this survey, it's really difficult to go and ask questions about historical assurance visits. I think what we have to do is take the feedback for the assurance visits that we're doing now, and where we see dissatisfaction, we seek to understand why those postmasters might have been dissatisfied with that visit and take appropriate actions, either across the assurance visit piece or with the individuals that have conducted that assurance visit.
Do I take it from your evidence earlier that Post Office is seeking to increase the rate of return on those feedback forms, so the number of people returning either positive or negative results?
Yes, I think the latest data, I think about 35% of visits conducted since June have received a feedback form, so it is higher than we would normally see across Post Office, but we would always look to try and encourage postmasters to feedback following a visit.
Could we look, please? I want to look at the branch assurance team, please. Could we look at Paul 2048256? Sorry, Paul 2044826. This is a branch assurance advisor induction training, I think policy or report. At paragraph 60 of your statement, you say there have been no new joiners since this was last updated. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
How many currently within the branch assurance team were in post before the common issues judgment?
I've been advised by the head of that team that I think it's 12 of the 18. I couldn't be quite sure, but I did ask that myself. And my understanding is it's 12, or around that number. Most of them have been in role for a significant length of time.
Could we look, please, at page 5? It's not a particularly thrilling question about version control, but it will help us understand the document. If it can go down, please. Thank you. We see here the version controls for this trading document, and on the 1st of September 2021, this version 0.1 is a draft version, and we've got decimal point figures to 4, then 3.1 and 4. At what point in this version control did this policy become a policy that was implemented and not just a draft policy?
So this isn't a policy. I believe this is a training guide.
Apologies.
So it doesn't sit in the policy that is the postmaster support policies. In answer to your question, I'm not sure. I joined in 2022, and this team don't line report into me. So I'm not sure when this actual training guide will have been enacted and taught through the teams that exist.
Would the people in the branch assurance team who were in post before common issues have been given training on their role or the new or how the policies have been updated since common issues?
I couldn't say for certain. My understanding is they would all have been given training on the policy that stands, and I think we've heard that the postmaster policies, that we have annual training on the postmaster policies with the relevant teams. I couldn't say on that particular piece of training material. I do know that shortly after I joined, the branch assurance advisors were all taken through additional training, and the head of operational support, who they now line into, has done a lot of work with them to show that actually the role of a stock check is just as important how you do it and how you conduct yourself and how you make the postmaster feel when doing that stock check, and that is just as important as making sure you do an accurate count. And I know that training's been, that all of the advisors have been through that training since I joined.
Some current and former postmasters have suggested that branch assurance visits should be conducted by a body independent of the post office. What would you say to that suggestion?
I understand why they would suggest that, and I know a lot of retailers would use third parties to do those stock takes. I think having a knowledge of the Horizon system and how you update that system once you've done your stock count is really important. And having the knowledge, we run quite a complicated business. If you look at the number of stamps that we sell and the currency, the foreign currency, having that background knowledge will, I believe, make that stock count much more accurate than employing an outside body to come in and do that count on our behalf. But that's my opinion rather than fact.
Could we bring up your statement, please, page 17? paragraph 47. This is looking to the future of branch assurance. You say, Post Office is currently reviewing the circumstances where an announced visit may not be the most appropriate cause of action. Should that be course of action?
Course, yes, sorry.
The intention is for there to be a 3-tier process, announced visits, as is current practice, notified visits, whereby postmasters are informed that a visit will be taking place on a specified date. Just pausing there, is the difference between an announced visit and a notified visit that the sub-postmaster agrees the date of the visit on the former, but not the latter?
That's right, yes.
And then there's unannounced visits with a clear governance protocol as to how and when these may be required. And if we look at paragraph 46, you say, in the past year there have been 2 unannounced visits which took place in exceptional circumstances with sign-off from the Chief Executive Officer, Nick Reed. So at present, if there's an unannounced visit, does that have to be sanctioned by the Chief Executive?
That is under review at the moment. So I think, I can't remember whether I noted my witness statement, but the circumstances between these 3 tiers of announced, notified and unannounced is being reviewed. And I believe there's a recommendation paper going to the SCG at the end of the month, if not next month. But we would definitely seek approval if we wanted to do an unannounced visit.
On the current proposal, from whom will you be seeking approval to do an unannounced visit?
I think as it stands at the moment, it would be the interim CEO.
And in what circumstances is it envisaged that an unannounced visit would be used?
I think where we believe there have been serious breaches of contract, and we've failed to engage the postmaster through all of the support mechanisms that we try and intervene with those postmasters prior to this, and they've failed to engage in any of that, and we are concerned as to the assurance of those assets in that branch, and that the notified would impact the outcome of that.
I want to look at now, I think the most substantial topic I'll deal with, which is investigating and resolving discrepancies. As I understand it, the dispute resolution system, as it were, has 3 primary teams involved: branch support centre, network support and resolution team, and the postmaster agent support team. Is that correct?
The postmaster account support team. Yes.
Sorry, accounts. And do they all report to you?
They do, through their head of. The BSC reports through a different head of. The network support and resolution reports through a different head of.
Are there systems in place to ensure that relevant knowledge of dispute resolution issues is communicated between those teams?
Yes, absolutely. The case management system that we use allows a case to be created, and then as it's handled through each of those processes, details of that, how the details of the case will be logged, and if it can't be resolved at each initial stage, all of those details will be passed through to the next stage, so they will be aware of all of the checks and balances that have already happened before they start their bit of the process.
That's a particular, I think as I understand it, that's on one particular case. Someone's dealing with it in one team, it gets passed over to another. I more meant, is there any systems in place that would, the people in different teams could spot if there were themes or trends in dispute resolution issues?
Yes, so the branch support centre, part of their role is to understand if there are systemic issues, particularly short-term issues that have arisen. We sometimes have IT issues with some of our third parties, and they would immediately understand that there's a problem and raise that with the relevant functions, if indeed those functions hadn't already spotted it, and inform the branch support centre. In terms of the transaction correction team, So I'll take, there are other investigations that we do through the network reconciliation team, and we do look at themes. So, for example, we know that 80% of our transaction corrections are issued due to cash pouch errors. So again, we look at the thematics and try and understand how we stop it at source rather than deal with it once it's happened. A good example of that is the issuing of note counters and the operational excellence incentive. If I come back to the network support and resolution side of things, through the monthly meetings, they also look at the root cause of the investigations that they have reviewed into discrepancies and understand the cause of those. And they are reported through.
I want to look at ways into that resolution system. Before I do, it's probably helpful just to set out what it is. There's a tier 1 investigation or support which is handled by the branch support centre, is that right?
That's right, yes.
If tier 1 can't deal with it or resolve the matter, it goes to tier 2, which is handled by tier 2 analysts in the network support and resolution team.
That's right. There's an intermediate step, which is a triage. So there is a triage case, and the triage will understand if there are any initial resolutions before it goes into the full tier 2 investigation. So there's an intermediate stage.
And then on top of that, there's a tier 3 handled by tier 3 analysts in the same team.
That's correct, yes.
And the ways into the system, one is to dispute a discrepancy at the end of a trading period.
That's right, yes.
And one is to dispute a transaction correction.
That is right, yes.
You say in your statement that a postmaster can call the branch support centre for assistance with a discrepancy at any stage.
That's correct, yes.
If a postmaster rings the branch support centre not at the end of a trading period, so midway through, regarding a discrepancy, will the branch support centre follow the tier 1 procedure?
They absolutely will. So I think you referred to them earlier today. We have a number of checks and balances that we ask postmasters to do on a daily, weekly and monthly basis. And at any point in those processes, if a postmaster experience or any of their assistants experience a discrepancy in that balancing, they should ring the branch support centre if they're not able to identify the cause themselves.
Could we look, please, at your statement, page 52, paragraph 113. I just want to clarify one point. You say a postmaster wishing to dispute a branch discrepancy must await trading period end to use the that's review or dispute function, but can seek the BSC support earlier than that. Now, just for clarity, if a postmaster raises a discrepancy with the BSC mid-month, so not at the end of the trading period, they can't resolve it at tier 1. Does that go to tier 2 at that point, or do they have to wait for the end of the trading period?
No, if they can't resolve it, generally the branch support centre will say, if you can wait, if you can do a balancing period, so do a full balance, and if it still exists, call us back and they will do the checks again, because it may have been a couple of days. They might have spotted that a transfer hasn't happened correctly between counters. I think what this is referring to is the formalisation of a discrepancy only happens at trading period end, and that's when the postmasters get the opportunity to use the review or dispute function. However, if the daily or weeklies don't balance in between that, they can ring the branch support centre. And if it's significant, and I think just for context, if it's significant and the branch support centre can't identify the cause, they do have the opportunity to push it into the tier 2 process prior to the trading period end.
Thank you. Can we look, please, at the screens that a postmaster sees, and it's poll 20448-048. I hope you can help us with some of these screenshots that you've provided. So we have on the first page, at the top it says screenshots of trading period end process. It says confirm loss gain, one or more declaration totals do not match the system derived figure. Press continue to see a list of discrepancies for confirmation. So is this the screen that pops up after a balance has been attempted and Horizon is saying there's a discrepancy, but it doesn't say what it is yet?
Yes, so for context, my understanding, and I haven't worked in a branch, but I have seen this process in operation in our model office. If you have more than one counter, you have to do a declaration of each counter. And if any of those counters has a discrepancy, it moves into an account. You then move to the next counter. Again, if that has a discrepancy, it goes into, I think we refer to it as a local suspense account. Because it may be, if you've not done the a transfer correctly, you might have a surplus in one counter and then a shortfall in the other, and they match off. If when you come to roll your last counter and there is still a balance in your local suspense, that is in effect the start of that discrepancy process, where you will then get given a choice of how you deal with that discrepancy.
Okay, so we get this screen on the next page. We have a confirm rollover type. Do you wish to roll over into a next trading period or into the next balancing period in this trading period? I don't think that's relevant because it just whether or not you're rolling over or into a trading period or a balancing period.
That's correct.
But that's correct. Thank you. If we turn over then, please. This says outstanding discrepancies of you have outstanding discrepancies of £9.99. Press continue to transfer this to local suspense and continue to roll over. Press to cancel the rollover. So at this point, is what it's saying is you can continue and go to the you can continue and go to rollover and deal with the discrepancies, or you can come out altogether and effectively you could do the count again or anything like that.
That's correct, yes. This is the individual stock unit rollover.
Yeah. So that's the stock unit. We then turn the page again. So is this the rollover? So once you've done all the stock units, you're then asking to roll over, and it says the branch local suspense amount is minus £9.99, which must be resolved prior to rollover of stock unit AA. Press to settle local suspense to resolve this and continue to roll over. Press to cancel the rollover.
That's correct, yes.
So again, at this point, the discrepancy has been highlighted. The postmaster can go forward to the next screen or can come out and perhaps recheck the cash or do anything like that.
That's correct, yes.
We then get the next one, which is two buttons, make good cash and review dispute called BSC. I want to start with the make good cash, please. And if we look at your statement at page 55, paragraph 121.
Is that going to be replaced on screen? Yeah.
Yes, sorry. You said, during preparations for phase 7 of the inquiry, Post Office identified that before a postmaster elects to settle cash or cheque, there is currently no reminder in Horizon that the postmaster should only use this function if certain that the issue has been caused by the postmaster's or the postmaster's assistant's negligence, carelessness or error. Post Office is investigating if such a reminder could be implemented in the Horizon system before completing the settle to cash process. So, firstly, I take it from this that Post Office's position is that a postmaster should only press the cash button if certain that the discrepancy has been caused by the postmaster's negligence, carelessness or error. Is that correct?
It's correct, but if I can add to that, and they're comfortable putting their own cash in. There could be a situation where they may know the cause, but it may be of a value that they can't put that value in all at once.
Right.
In which case they have a choice to then settle it to review or dispute and discuss the next steps for that.
Yes, I'm not going to get involved with that. More look just at the circumstances in which, because we wouldn't even get to that if the first bit wasn't fulfilled. No. So there has to be that.
Yes.
Has the Post Office? Are we any further on with whether or not there will be a warning on Horizon?
Yes, we are. In two ways. So my preference would be that there is a pop-up box if a postmaster chooses to select make good cash, and at that point they get a reminder. There isn't currently a pop-up box at that point in the trading period end process, and that involves Accenture and Fujitsu. So the timescales for that are much longer. So what I've asked to happen is in the pop-up that you saw there that says you have a balance in your local suspense, do you want to settle or cancel? We're going to expand that pop-up box to have that message in to say, only do this if you're really clear that discrepancy was as a result of a mistake in branch and that you are comfortable putting cash in to balance this.
So
and that we can do that ourselves within our IT function, so it's a lot quicker.
Can we, just for clarity, can we go back to the, it's POL 20448048. And just if we go to page 4, please. Are you saying it will be at this stage that it's the message is displayed?
That's correct, yes.
Will that have the other benefit of, because presumably at this stage a postmaster could see the discrepancy, decide to cancel, recount the cash, and then decide to put the money in at that point, without actually pressing the make good cash button?
Absolutely, that would have that impact.
So will the warning will be sufficiently clear to postmasters that they should only correct the cash if they are certain of the circumstances you said?
That's correct, yes.
That can come down, thank you. Will there be, when people do weekly balances and those sorts of matters, will there be equivalent warnings if a discrepancy is ever noticed at when rolling into a trading period, a balancing period or not?
No, I don't believe so, because the processes that we follow, or we ask postmasters to follow as part of their daily cash declarations or weekly balance, wouldn't formalise a discrepancy. So we wouldn't ask them to action it other than to call the branch support centre if they need support to try and resolve it before trading period end.
I want to look now, please, at the other button, which was the review dispute. Could we go to page 49 of your statement, please, paragraph 102? It says here that it was initially, this was what was previously termed settle centrally. It was, you said, 13th May 2021 changed to review dispute. And then in February 2023, the on-screen display was changed from review dispute to review dispute call BSC. Why was the call BSC added?
The process that we ask postmasters to follow following use of review or dispute is to call the branch support centre, because the sooner we are engaged, the sooner we can start to understand the circumstances that discrepancy might have occurred. What we were seeing was a number of postmasters using the review or dispute functionality and not calling the branch support centre and asking for assistance to understand and resolve that discrepancy.
Has this had an effect in terms of did you notice more calls following the change?
We did, but what we've done since then, and I don't know whether you'll come to it later in my witness statement, following use of review or dispute, we relied on the postmaster to call us, so to create the case. And we had an outbound calling process through our postmaster account support team to try and contact that postmaster to discuss the discrepancy. What we have now is an automatic case create, so we have a link between the use of review or dispute directly into Dynamics. So we're able to see straight away where a postmaster's use review or dispute, understand if they've already called the branch support centre, and then immediately start that outbound calling if they haven't. So it allows us to understand to intervene much quicker.
Thank you. I want to look at the network support resolution team, so dealing with Tier 2 and Tier 3 investigations. Can I look, please, at POL 3039629? So I think this is a generic job description for a support advisor. If we turn the page, we see the job title at the bottom, support advisor. And then if we turn the page again, there's principal accountabilities, which are quite generic. And it says you will also have role-specific bolt-on accountabilities. These are, and then over the page, the Tier 2 Resolution Support Advisor bolt-on. It says you will be an expert in post office branch operations, particularly branch accounting processes, and you will be able to use multiple data sources to support postmasters and branches to find the causes of branch discrepancies. If we look at the Tier 3 analyst one as well, please, that's POL 20448081. We've got the Tier 3 analyst. And the second paragraph, the purpose of the role, we see it's a specialist role that requires higher level understanding of post office operations to include extensive knowledge of Horizon and branch accounting transactions. And then over the page, knowledge, experience and skills, if we go down, there's excellent knowledge of Horizon, interpretation of branch logs. Why does the Tier 2 analyst job description not require expressly knowledge of or working or detailed knowledge of Horizon?
I think the level of review that our Tier 2 investigators, the checklist that they follow, they know where to get the data that they need to get to for that particular bit of the checklist. So knowing in detail the kind of inner workings of Horizon isn't as important than the Tier 3 team, who are reviewing much more complex cases. but also overseeing the quality of all of those tier 2 cases. That said, many of our tier 2 support advisors will come from the branch support centre or from internal roles where they are taken through that Horizon training as part of that induction.
If we look at the tier 2 role, please, if we look at poll 204482229, this is a postmaster support policy for accounting dispute resolution. And could we look, please, at page 15? If we can go down to show tier 2, please. So these investigations are full detailed investigations after being assigned by triage. And the second bullet point is undertaking a check of the Horizon system information to ascertain whether Horizon was a contributory factor to the discrepancy. Bearing in mind the level of expertise with Horizon you just discussed for tier 2 analysts, what does that check actually involve?
It involves a number of things. So we talked about the branch impacting problem process that IT own. We have knowledge articles for all of the known branch impacting problems and screenshots of how those branch impacting problems might impact a branch. So one of the first things we do is check that the discrepancy hasn't, or the branch hasn't exhibited any of those branch impacting problems. We look at calls into the IT support desk as well as the branch support centre to understand if the branch has logged any issues with their either hardware or software from a Horizon perspective. And then we recalculate a cash flow. So we take the opening balance from a set period, and that's the period under review for the discrepancy. We, through Horace and Credence, that are the databases that hold the Horizon transaction data, we look at all the input deposits and withdrawals and all of the cash flows through that branch and recreate almost a closing balance. And we check that that is actually the closing balance that Horizon's showing us. So we try and recreate that balance to understand whether we've got missing transactions that don't flow through to the bottom line from Horizon by taking that data out and recalculating it.
I want to, you just mentioned the branch impacting problems. I think that's you said it's maintained by the IT team within Post Office.
That's right, yes.
So is it that the IT team draft the copy that goes into the branch impacting problem database for your team to read when doing investigations?
Yes, so they create knowledge articles and they're the subject matter experts, so they will create the knowledge articles, but a member of my team will review them to make sure they can be easily understood and they reflect the actual issue before they're published on the knowledge base that can be used by a number of different teams.
Is there so there is some sort of assurance checking on that, but is there any checks to be done? So at tier 3, so if tier 2 can't resolve a matter, it goes to tier 3, and they say, well, actually, this is a known problem in the branch impacting problem. Is there feedback to the IT team to change the way the branch impacting problem database is worded so that the tier 2 team can understand it?
Yes, that absolutely would be.
But that, you say, absolutely would be. Does that mean it hasn't happened today?
It's unusual.
Are Fujitsu involved at all in the tier 2 process?
No, they're not. Other than requesting ARQ data where required.
If we forgive me, sorry, I had a reference. If you could go to page 59, please. Sorry, page 60, my apologies. So you're here talking about after this Tier 2 process, and you say, if there are no suspected issues, the investigation will continue, and that might lead to a conclusion that Horizon was not a contributory factor in the discrepancy. However, if the data suggests that there could be an issue, the IT team would do further analysis. Is it fair to say then that the team, when resolving this, are, so once the investigation's been done, if they haven't found a problem or haven't identified a problem, they are still content to rely on the data produced by Horizon to satisfy themselves that there has been a loss to post office?
I think the data that sits from Horizon in Horace and Credence is the start of that investigation, but the investigation looks at a whole raft of other things. So it looks at the operational strength of that branch. Have they been doing daily cash decks? Have they been doing weekly balances? It looks at outstanding transaction corrections. It may look to see if all of the transaction acknowledgements have been processed. So it's part of a wider review that is then used to come to a fair outcome and discuss that with the postmaster.
Okay, that can come down, thank you. Could we look please at poll 20448072? The document's titled Escalation Process on the left. On the right, the process summary says, if a discrepancy has been investigated, this process shows how it can be escalated if the postmaster does not agree with the decision or if the loss cannot be established. And then, if we go to page 2, please. It says the weekly case review will assess the case and based on the success rate value will make the decision to escalate the case to Tier 3 or clear the account. What is the success rate value?
I think what that's referring to is the fact that there is a cost both in resource and time to escalating, and if we believe that actually as a result of that escalation it won't change the outcome of a case, then we might choose to write that off rather than take a postmaster through a further process that we might not get a different outcome. So we do have the opportunity, subject to value limits and also the history of that branch and potentially previous write-offs, just to take that and on that occasion not progress with the discrepancy but simply write it off.
But just so I'm clear, if the postmaster's disputing it and wants to go to Tier 3, it's not the case that, or is it the case that it could be refused to be escalated but not written off?
I don't think that's the case. I think if a postmaster's escalating it, we will always review the case. We always review all cases from a Tier 3 perspective to make sure that that case has been carried out consistently and transparently. Once we've reviewed that, we then make a decision on the next steps for that case.
So this escalation policy is, in essence, it's if the sub-postmaster disputes it, it's going to be escalated. But this is, should it be written off rather than be escalated?
Yes. It will go for a review.
Please could we look at page 63, paragraph 141 of your statement? You refer to the here if a postmaster it's 140, my apologies. You say if a postmaster disagrees with the outcome of a tier 3 review, then the postmaster can challenge the decision by email or phone call to their analyst, who will present the case to the dispute resolution committee for review. And at 141, you say if a postmaster disagrees with the outcome of the dispute resolution committee, there is currently no further or independent review forum. Post Office is currently considering the use of an independent panel as part of reviewing its model for recovering shortfalls outlined in paragraphs 35 and 36 above. Has there been any progress with that review in terms of whether there will be an independent review of the dispute resolution process at any point?
I think the review is currently underway, so a working group has been established and we are looking at all of the things that need to be true as part of that potential recovery process. And an independent review or a body that has independent people, or maybe postmasters or former postmasters, whether that should be created to review these, yes.
We're going to come to in a moment, that can come down for the time being, thank you. We're going to come to in a moment civil recoveries. At the minute, your evidence is that Post Office isn't pursuing civil proceedings to recover discrepancies from postmasters. With the inclusion of an independent review, or whether that's the review as to whether that's going to happen, will that be complete before a decision is made on whether or not Post Office pursues civil litigation in future against postmasters?
It has to be part of that process, I believe.
Part of the same process. Thank you. The NFSP have suggested a 3-stage test for dispute resolution. The first is to ask if the discrepancies caused by Horizon. The second, I may be paraphrasing slightly, but the second is it a mistake by the postmaster or assistant? And only then finally ask, have Post Office's assets been used in an unintended manner? What's your view on that as a framework for dispute resolution?
I don't think that's dissimilar to the framework that we operate in now. Part of the review process is to understand if Horizon has contributed. Then we talk to the postmaster to understand the circumstances, and only then, with the cooperation of the postmaster, we look to resolution of that discrepancy. So I don't think we're disagreeing there at all. I
just want to briefly look at another point on types of escalation, please. It's POL 20447,943. This document is titled Identifying Postmaster Support Needs on the left, but the process summary says during an investigation the advisor may behave, I think that should be, the advisor may have a suspicion that financial crime may have occurred. This is the process for referring any such suspicions to the Central Investigations Unit. So there's a bit of a mismatch between the process name and what the process describes. What instructions are there in place to an investigator in circumstances where they suspect that there is financial crime? What instructions are there in place for what the investigator says to the postmaster before referring it to the central investigation unit?
So I think the initial triage and the data collection and analysis would provide evidence that there may be in misappropriation or financial crime. At that point, it would the triage form would be completed and it would be referred to the A&CI team. I don't think at that point we would have had a conversation with the postmaster unless the postmaster has spoken to us and suggested that one of their colleagues may have been involved in the discrepancy.
I see. So this is done purely at triage, and then it's off to another department.
Absolutely.
We'll deal with it from there. That document can come down. Thank you. Please can we look at page 61 of your statement, paragraph 133. Just looking at the time taken for investigations. You say that the NSRT aims to complete Tier 2 investigation within 20 working days. I'm going to say that some take longer. If we look, please, at POL 48229. Page 16. Oh, sorry, it's the accounting dispute resolution document again. Page 16, please. And if we go to the bottom, please. Here it says that the Tier 2 investigation is to aim to investigate within 10 working days. Has this been overtaken now when it's a 20 working day limit based on your evidence?
I think if you look at the total time, so all of Tier 2 investigations will be quality assessed by either their team manager or a Tier 3 analyst, and that's part of the process. So I think 20 days is the end-to-end ambition for discrepancy reviews.
Could we look, please, at POL 2044821? This is a paper that you authored on the 31st of January 2024 for the group executive report. If we look at page 3, paragraph 9, please. Network support and resolution case backlog. The additional network support resource has made good progress in reducing the number of outstanding discrepancy cases, with period 9 ending at 588, the lowest for 12 months. The number of cases awaiting triage has also reduced to just over 1,200, the target being to have no case older than the 12-week process. Is there still an issue with the backlog of cases?
I think the backlog is building again, so it's higher than it was then. I think that's caused by a couple of things. So the auto case create that I described earlier is really important in identifying those cases a lot quicker. So the cases are getting through the system into that Tier 2 world a lot quicker. And I'd like to think that postmasters are also becoming more aware of their option to review or dispute, and therefore using that button more and asking for help. I guess what comes with that is, from a resource perspective, there's a lag, and we need to understand how we address that.
What in terms of there's a backlog, what impact is that having on the time it takes to complete investigations?
The backlog was historic discrepancies when I first joined. So it wasn't necessarily impacting the new discrepancies that we were pushing through the new process and being able to resolve where we could. These were a mixture of discrepancies that it was right to take more than 20 days, because what we shouldn't do is rush discrepancies and come to an incorrect conclusion. So it's right that some do take longer than 20 days, but some were also very historic. And my ambition was to, and I asked for additional resource to clear those, and we are getting through and resolving those as we speak.
Were you given the resource?
Yes, I was.
So now, if someone has a case come in to tier 2, do they have a reasonable expectation? No, that's the wrong thing. So is it likely that it will be resolved within 20 working days?
We're not at the 70%, which is our ambition, but we're not far off. But I guess back to my first point, it's really important that we don't try and chase a service level agreement at the detriment of that investigation and the outcome for the postmaster.
So that's probably a good time to take our break. We're making good progress. I don't envisage any difficulty finishing.
Fine. Resumption time this afternoon, Mr. Stephen?
Well, I'll probably get it wrong again. Should we say 25 past? Oh, 25 to, sorry. I just listened to what I heard. Misheard, I should say, to my right. 25 to, please.
25 to 4.
Yeah.
Fine.
Thank you. So can you see and hear us?
Thank you.
I'll continue and look now at the Postmaster Account Support Team. Could we have page 48 of your statement, please? Subparagraph E. You say the PAST, which is the Postmaster Account Support Team, which is responsible for initiating contact with postmasters who have escalated disputes using the review or dispute function, but have not contacted the BSc, and following investigation by the BSc and or NSRT for arranging repayment plans and write-offs where appropriate with postmasters. Just a point of clarification, should the and after BSc be or? So the team is responsible for A, contacting postmasters who haven't escalated disputes to the BSc but use the review or dispute function, and separately they're also tasked with initiating contact with people who, following an investigation, it's been found there's a discrepancy.
No, it's and or, because if following a conversation with the BSc, we've been able to resolve the discrepancy at the tier 1 stage, and the postmaster then says, oh yes, I understand, how do I settle? They may then close the case and point them in the direction of the PASS team, because they've resolved the discrepancy, and the postmaster then wants to understand how to resolve that.
Okay, so and or.
So and or is the right, yes.
Okay. That can come down, thank you. Why is it that the Postmaster Account Support Team calls the sub-postmaster if the sub-poster themselves haven't called the BSc, rather than the BSc or Network Support Resolution Team?
So the BSc doesn't operate an outbound call facility, and that is something that we are going to look at, because it may be that they are better placed, given that the knowledge they have of that tier 1 checklist, to do that. So it's part of an ongoing review. I think where a branch doesn't call following use of review and dispute, it's really important that we do get the details from the postmaster or their colleagues about that discrepancy, and therefore currently the Postmaster Account Support Team that take that role in trying to contact the postmasters.
Could we look, please, at poll 20448322? So this is described in your witness statement as a January 2023 audit report. Could we look, please, at page 3? And if we go to the bottom, this is an executive summary partway through. We see this is authored by you. And back to the top, please. It says the increase in the use of the review and dispute button by postmasters, an increase of 60% year on year, is affecting the workload of the teams and is having an impact on their ability to respond and resolve within the desired 10-day time frame. Year to date, at period 8, 76% of cases are completed within 10 days. You then say later on, whilst the service and support teams are adhering to the redesign process and control framework and closing 93% of cases, and not all of which are resolved, achievement of their desired 10-day investigation completion timeframe and ability to recover established losses is being hindered by postmaster behaviour and a lack of business appetite to recover losses. What do you mean by hindered by postmaster behaviour?
Can I just, correct something? The management comment was written by myself. The executive summary would have been the summary created from the internal audit team.
Right. So this isn't your work? That's
their observations following the internal audit, yes, and then my response is underneath in the management comment.
So you're not speaking to these. Do you not agree with that terminology?
No, I think hindered is probably a harsh word. I think the inability to contact postmasters to discuss the circumstances that the discrepancy might have arisen in does hinder the investigation process. And that's why we've looked at the auto case create and starting to talk to postmasters a lot sooner.
Could we please look at poll 2044825? Now, I don't propose to bring up the statement on the screen, but for you, it's paragraph 123, which is page, 123A, so page 57. You say that the support team we were discussing will make an outbound call to the postmaster and send them a letter and statement of their account. And this is in circumstances where a postmaster has pressed the review and dispute button but not called the BSC. And you say the call script, and you exhibit them, the call script being here. It says this, when we look at this document, it says this script is for outbound calls to postmasters who have settled a negative discrepancy or several discrepancies that result in a negative amount at branch trading. So is this call script used for people, for postmasters who haven't contacted to the BSC as well? So the postmaster presses the review and dispute button, they don't call the BSC, the postmaster account support team calls them, and your statement suggests this is the script that's used. Is that correct?
That's right, yes.
Right. If we look, please, at page 2, and if we go down, please, to main conversation, it says, main conversation, we need to find out if the postmaster person in charge is aware of the reasons for the discrepancies. Do you understand the reasons for these discrepancies? And then the person's name. 1, if they need more information, talk through their account entries with them, giving as much information and detail as you can. 2, if they understand the reason for the discrepancy, I'm glad you understand what happened here, Mr. So-and-so. We just want to make sure that you're aware, comfortable with the reason for the discrepancy, and offer our support if not. What will happen next is that we'll send you a letter with a statement next week so you can see it all for yourself. Give us a call back if you have any questions when you receive it. Now, do you think this is sufficient in the script in directing people for the circumstances in which a postmaster should be asked by Post Office to settle a discrepancy?
I think on review, no, and I think this needs to be included in the work we're doing to give postmasters greater clarity on what their options are and how we will support them with any discrepancy that they may experience as part of their trading period end or outside of that. So I think we definitely have work to do on being clearer.
So at the minute this document isn't being reviewed for the issues we discussed before about making it clear the circumstances in which Post Office thinks as postmaster should accept a discrepancy, but your evidence is that you will review this.
Absolutely, yes.
And similar scripts with similar teams.
Absolutely.
You also, in the part of your statement I went to, you also referred to a letter, please, a letter that's sent out. Could I look at that? It's POL 20448-197. So I think this is an example of the initial letter that's sent out by the team. Over the page, please. We have accepting the discrepancy. If, however, you understand and accept the discrepancy, please contact my team on, and it goes on from there. Again, is this something that is being reviewed by Post Office at the moment?
Absolutely. So discrepancy letter 1 and then the second follow-up have had a complete overhaul. They've been signed off and I believe are currently with Accenture because these are auto-created as part of our IT systems. So we have to go through Accenture to get them updated and changed. But yes, I appreciate that these aren't as clear or as helpful as they should be, and the new ones are much more helpful, give more information around the reasons and the different categories, and also where to go for support for each of those.
I asked this question this morning. Why is it that these letters and scripts aren't explicitly clear on what Post Office expects of postmasters?
So I can't talk about historically. I think the work that myself and my team have done to date have probably focused on the bigger initiatives that will improve support to postmasters in order to try and stop discrepancies happening. I think as part of my preparation for this inquiry, looking at these letters, the knowledge articles, the pop-up box that we talked about earlier, it became clear to me that we don't do a good job in talking to postmasters about the circumstances of a discrepancy and what support we have available and how we help them. And as part of that, we're looking at all of these documents and what's available via the training, I think, as Marshall talked earlier, to give better clarity. It's part of our ongoing review and continuous improvement that we should never stop doing.
I want to look at another part of this letter which you yourself in your witness statement raise. Sir, for you, we don't need to go there. It's page 81, paragraph 198, if you wish to review it. Can we look at page 3 of the document on screen? So this is appears to be a statement of account. It says it's not a demand for payment at the top. and it gives 4 different types of discrepancy, which I think you acknowledge in your witness statement. These type, the classification and type of discrepancy isn't explained to a postmaster receiving this letter.
That's right, yes.
And in broad terms, an outstanding discrepancy is a discrepancy that the postmaster has previously received a letter about.
That's right.
A new discrepancy is a brand new one that's arisen first letter. A previously agreed discrepancy is where the postmaster has agreed that that is a discrepancy for which they are responsible.
That's right, yes.
And a disputed discrepancy is where there's an ongoing investigation.
Or the investigation's been completed and the postmaster has disputed it.
And we see at the bottom there's a statement total which says 800, I can't get my numbers today, £88.13. So it doesn't distinguish, the total doesn't distinguish between different types of discrepancies. But am I right in saying that in Post Office's view, the only one that it would seek for postmasters to pay back is the previously agreed discrepancy?
That's right, yes.
Now, in your statement, you referred to a review, that this was under review, and you, just in your evidence earlier, said this is now with Accenture. Can you help us with how this has been corrected in the new form of the letter?
Absolutely. So the descriptions that you've just talked about for each of those 4 categories will be written at the side of those. So that will help explain what we mean by each of those. The statement total will be removed because you're right. It shouldn't be on there. It bears no reference to the individual discrepancy categories. And actually, if we scroll up so we can see the top, we've had feedback previously from, I believe, the NFSP, but a number of postmaster forums, that whilst we say this is not a demand for payment, when you open a letter and see demand for payment, that is quite alarming. So what we're also doing is removing that statement from this account.
So it will no longer say at all this is not a demand for payment.
And we'll talk to what it is in the front covering letters, which we've just talked about.
So the front covering letter, will that explain that it isn't a demand for payment?
It will absolutely explain that.
That can come down, thank you. I want to move to civil recovery, please. Could we look at page 9 of your witness statement, paragraph 21? You say that Post Office does not currently have a team or any individuals taking civil enforcement action against postmasters to recover shortfalls shown by Horizon, and for the avoidance of doubt, at present no civil enforcement action relating to any shortfalls is being carried out against sub-postmasters. When was that decision taken?
My understanding it was sometime around 2018-19, but I've had to rely on that fact from other people.
Could we look, please, at page 24 of your statement? Sorry, I've got an incorrect reference there. It might be paragraph 24, my apologies. Yeah, sorry, paragraph 24. It's page 10. You're answering a question about the number of civil claims pursued by Post Office. And you say you've I think completed this with assistance of people from the Post Office Remediation Unit. You say, I understand owing to the incompleteness of records, changes over the years to relevant teams involved in civil enforcement activity, and the fact that many of those individuals no longer work at Post Office, those informing me have been unable to establish and assure the sources, completeness and accuracy of this data. And you go on to say that the data that has been identified indicates that Post Office was successful in obtaining civil remedies against postmasters in fewer than 100 instances since the Rule 9 start date. What degree of confidence can you put in that figure of fewer than 100?
That information was provided to me by the remediation team, so I have no accountability for any of those existing civil remedies. So I have to take it on the authority through which it was provided to me.
Presumably then you're not able to speak to why the data is in such a way that it can only be said that fewer than 100 instances have been pursued. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And sorry, can you remind me what the Rule 9 start date was, so I've got some idea of the period?
Yes, I'll just so I don't get it wrong, I'll just double check the Rule 9. It was defined as since Post Office ceased carrying out prosecutions due to concerns with the Horizon system.
So approximately early as 2013, maybe a little bit later.
Yeah.
Fine.
That can come down. Thank you for the time being. Who would be best placed to provide that information then if we wanted to?
My understanding is there has been a witness statement to confirm that.
Can we look please at the future status of civil proceedings? Poll 20448 This is described as loss recovery update. It's exhibited to your statement. Can you assist for what purpose this document was created?
This document was created by our interim CEO to talk to SEG about our current position on loss recovery.
So if we turn please to page 4, options and recommendations, we see there's several options listed. At the top, maintain current position, and if we go down to 4, please, seek recovery of established losses via a civil means deduction from remuneration following an agreed defined process with an external review board. That will take final recovery decision, and the recommendation there is yes. Is that still a current recommendation?
I think the recommendation was more around proceeding to understand what options we would have to seek recovery, what circumstances we would use those options, and as a result of that, we've set up a working group to review just that. This isn't necessarily a carte blanche to go ahead and say, right, seek recovery. This is a signal of an intent that we need to do more work on.
Could we look please at poll 20460 So this is strategic executive group report. I think earlier in your evidence you mentioned SEG. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah. We see you are the author, 20th of May 2024. The title is Postmaster Losses Overview / Branch Discrepancies. Was this the proposal that's led to the working group, or was this a paper that led to a proposal to lead to the working group?
This was an earlier paper, so the discussion about the extent of losses on our profit and loss account and how we address those losses has been ongoing since I joined, and this was a paper that I wrote to move that understanding and that discussion on. It wasn't necessarily what drove the conversation that paper was written for at a later SEG.
Could we go down, please, to page 2? And down to paragraph 11, please. It says the table below summarises the key drivers of loss, what additional activity is required to improve prevention of the loss, and also recommendations on whether Post Office should start recovery activity on any of these losses. And we see loss driver current at the top, current postmaster discrepancies post April 21. There's recommendations for prevention, and then we have recommendations for recovery. Is that referring to civil recovery, as in issuing civil proceedings?
Not necessarily, no. It was that we have, I guess, a number of options to seek recovery from postmasters. So again, that was looking at those options by which we would recover other than voluntarily.
What would so that would include attachment of earnings, would it?
Yes, with an auto deduction from REM, if that was one of the options that we choose to.
So it's recovery, but not necessarily civil proceedings, but some form of non-voluntary recovery from the postmaster.
Absolutely, and having options to do that.
If we can zoom in on that recommendation for recovery part, it says, the first bullet point, do not start recovery until, I mean, that doesn't actually assist, I don't think. I think leave it zoomed out, please, if we can. It says, do not start recovery until clarified horizon data used in discrepancy review process is robust. Could you just expand on what you meant by that?
I can't remember the timing of it, and whether it was before or after the letter, but obviously as we've seen the inquiry progress, there was, and based on conversations that were ongoing with certain criminal proceedings that I think we've talked about, as one of the options being civil recovery, I think we'd need to assure ourselves and anybody else that was involved in that as to the reliability of the data in Horizon. So it wasn't just an internal assurance, it was to be able to go to external bodies and go, no, we can rely on that data and should.
When it says clarified Horizon data used in discrepancy review process is robust, what sort of assurance would Post Office need on that before it commences civil recovery in future, or indeed any non-voluntary recovery?
In my opinion, and I know this has been looked at, we need to make sure we've got external expert assurance as to that data. Given where we've been and all of the conversations we've had as part of the inquiry, I think it would be important to get some external expert assurance for everyone.
Could we look, please, at poll 20448520? So this describes a SEG tactical meeting on the 17th of July 2024. Does that have any special meaning that it's a tactical meeting?
I think it was just the different types of strategic executive group meeting. I think they had strategic ones and tactical ones. But
So the paper we just saw before, that was dated May 2024. Was that too old to be considered at this meeting in 17th of July 2024?
I can't recall, but this would have been an update on that position with a view to, I think that was the May paper was quite a rounded paper talking about discrepancies, how they arise, trying to get all of SEG to a level of understanding so that they're making more informed decisions when we come with proposals and recommendations. And I think from recollection, although I can't recall the paper that went with this, that would have been a more detailed next steps versus a teaching session.
We see you're not in the present line at the very top, but if we just scroll down slightly, when it comes to branch discrepancies, you join the meeting. And if we go, please, we don't need to read all of it, but if we go to page 2, there's a discussion about recovering discrepancies, and towards the bottom of the page it says SEG discussed a number of other alternatives, including some form of losses pool to which all postmasters contributed and from which repayments would be made. Could you just describe what that proposal was?
So that was something suggested by one of our legal team. And
do you know who in the legal team?
Neil Wallace. So I think his opinion, and again, this is something that we need to look at all options, was to, if we had a budget for losses and that budget wasn't achieved during any one year, then however much we were short of, or how the benefit we created from not spending all that money on losses would go back to postmasters to try and encourage postmasters to run operationally kind of robust branches and seek support for discrepancies when they first saw them. And as a result of that, our cost in our profit and loss account would be less, which means ultimately we'd be able to give more remuneration to all our postmasters.
This reads like the proposal is to say postmasters contribute to a general pool to make up for losses or discrepancies in Horizon.
That's not my understanding, but again, this will form part of the working group conversations and looking at what options and alternatives we have.
Is this losses pool a matter that is actually being still sorry, I started again. Is the losses pool suggestion under active consideration still?
I couldn't say for certain because I've not been involved in those working groups over the last month or so. So I don't know.
And in summary terms, can you assist at all where the working groups got to with next steps in terms of civil recoveries?
I can't, no. Sorry, I've not been involved. I will pick up my involvement again over the next couple of weeks.
So that's all the questions I have. I'll look around the room. There's questions from Howe & Co and NFSP.
Right.
Hello, Ms. Park. I have some questions for you. Simon Oldnall gave evidence yesterday, and Tracy Marshall this afternoon gave evidence and confirmed that it's Post Office's position that it does not recover losses except where a postmaster agrees the reasons for the shortfall. Now, witnesses have said that's Post Office's position. Do you accept that?
Absolutely, yes.
And paragraph 15 of your statement, you set out 12 postmaster policies. I think you call them a suite of policies, which you say set out the guidelines of how postmasters are supported and their assistance across a number of key areas by
That's
Post
right.
Office. And it sets out minimum operating standards for Post Office. And are you familiar with these policies, Ms. Park?
I'm familiar with all of the policies in general, but more familiar with the ones that sit in my area.
Okay. Could we then go very quickly to a section of a policy that Mr. Steen took Mr. Reid to last week? And it's POL 00448000. This is the Postmaster Account Support Policy, and it's page 8 of 25, section 2.5 of the risk. It's just coming up on the screen now. So page 8, please. Just as you, so we can see the second paragraph there, and it says the Post Office can recover losses from a postmaster when such losses are caused through negligence, carelessness, or error, and Post Office has carried out a reasonable and fair investigation as set out in the Postmaster Accounting Dispute Resolution Policy. And just pausing there, Mr. Stevens took you to that policy earlier on this afternoon, just before 3 o'clock. And this is the Tier 2 investigation, isn't it? And the Tier 3 investigation.
That's the reasonable and fair investigation that piece refers to.
And in Tier 2, one of 9 actions that can be taken within an investigation is to undertake a check on the Horizon system information to ascertain whether Horizon was a contributory factor in the discrepancy. Is that right?
That's right, yes.
And Tier 3 sets out 5 contractual thresholds, and one of those 5 is that the Horizon system information has been checked to ascertain whether the Horizon system was a contributory factor to the discrepancy. So part of the investigation, but there is an investigation into a shortfall.
That's correct, yes.
So going back to the text of the policy, so Post Office can recover the losses, carry out a reasonable investigation, as set out in the other policy, the resolution policy, as to the cause and reason for the loss, and going over the page, whether it was properly attributed to the postmaster, and then postmasters are also responsible for losses caused by their assistants. So we can take that off the screen now, thank you. So do you accept, in principle, there is scope within the policy, this policy, for recovery based on Horizon shortfall?
I think that if we're talking about a shortfall, it will be linked that the way a shortfall is identified is by doing a full count of cash and cash equivalents in a branch and comparing that to Horizon data. So if we are, or what Horizon expects the value to be in that branch. So I think if we're talking about shortfalls, they will all be linked back to Horizon because that's the operating system that we check back to.
Okay, so you do accept, I think, is your answer, that that there can be recovery based on a Horizon shortfall under the policy?
Yes.
And the concern that our clients have, and we represent some current sub-postmasters as well as many sub-postmasters who were affected by the scandal, and their concern is, and we put this to Ms. Marshall earlier, is that the Post Office's policies do not reflect Post Office expressed intent and the evidence that the witnesses have given in this inquiry. If it's the position that Post Office does not recover Horizon shortfall losses, except for when a sub-postmaster agrees to repay those losses and starts to repay, why doesn't the policy say that? The policy seems to say something completely different and opposite.
I think my understanding that the policies, as well as the contract, should include the opportunity such that if the circumstances are shown that the shortfall is a result of negligence, carelessness or error, and we do have situations where actually Horizon data isn't involved, where we've spoken to the postmaster and, for example, a safe has been left open, or they haven't been doing regular cash decks and couldn't identify and haven't been running their branches in an operationally, I guess, sound way, where cash has fallen into the bin. So we should have that opportunity in our policies and contracts, such that when we're confident that all of the support is in place and we're doing all of the things we should be doing, we're doing the right training, the right interventions, we should have that opportunity. And therefore, I do believe it's right to have it in there, but I understand why at the moment we're not necessarily fulfilling that opportunity to its full extent.
Of course, yes. If someone leaves the safe open and leaves the door open and goes out for the day, perhaps that's different. But the position that the Post Office has accepted in this inquiry is that post offices do not recover shortfalls unless the postmaster agrees with the reasons for the shortfalls. That's not what is said in the policy. Do you accept that the policy should reflect Post Office's position, the position I've just articulated? And you can say something about other extraneous factors like leaving safe doors open and going out for the day. But you're not being clear in the policy.
I think we could be more overt with our current position in the policy and in some of the communications that we have with postmasters during the investigation process, you're right.
And our position is that the policy should be reviewed. Do you accept that it should be reviewed?
Absolutely.
And changed?
We will take that, definitely.
And will sub-postmasters be entitled to comment on the postmaster account support policy and accounting dispute resolution policies before they're finalised?
I think we referred to that, Ms Marshall referred to that earlier, so absolutely.
Super. So, well, that's, I've now got some, one other line of questioning for you. We asked Ms Marshall this morning about Mr Patterson's letter to Mr Reid, dated the 17th of May 2024. Are you familiar with that letter?
I am, yes.
It's well known to the inquiry now. And it's worth saying that it says in the second paragraph, to be clear, Fujitsu will not support the Post Office to act against sub-postmasters. We will not provide support for any enforcement actions taken by Post Office against sub-postmasters, whether civil, criminal, for alleged shortfalls, fraud or false accounting. Now, I should say at this stage, before I ask you a question, that I've been, I've looked at the fifth corporate statement of Mr Patterson, and the reference, we don't need to call it up for the inquiry, is WITN 06650500, and at paragraphs 66 and 67 of that statement, Mr Patterson states that Fujitsu does continue, when contractually bound to do so, to provide ARQ data, but Fujitsu has sought to put in place processes to ensure that any ARQ data it provides is not used in enforcement action against postmasters. And one of the things that Fujitsu is seeking to do is require Post Office to confirm, when requesting ARQ data, whether it's to be used for redress of sub-postmasters or investigation or action into or actions against a postmaster or member of a branch staff. So with that caveat, it's right, isn't it, that Fujitsu are not going to cooperate by assisting or do not intend to cooperate to assist Post Office in taking any sort of enforcement action against postmasters. Do you accept that?
I accept that that's the letter, but...
Sir, I see that you're...
Well, the letter speaks for itself, and I think this witness is incapable of giving an answer other than the letter speaks for itself.
Indeed. I'll move on. I just wanted to clarify that point with her. My question to you is, how can the Post Office fully investigate without this assistance, without this data?
So the data as it exists at the moment and sits in Horace and Credence, and that's the data we use to investigate. I find it quite alarming that the provider of an EPOS operating system is not assured of the reliability of the data that is in that system. But we don't need Fujitsu's cooperation because the data exists in our systems, and that when we use that data as part of the investigation.
My final question for you then is that Fujitsu doesn't consider that the Horizon system should be used to evidence shortfalls. Do you accept that that is right? The Horizon system should not be used to support recovery action against sub-postmasters?
I don't accept that, but I understand we should seek to do some external assurance on that. And I find it quite confusing that that data could be used for remediation, but not to support a review of how a discrepancy might have arisen.
Well, I put this to Ms. Marshall. The confusion shouldn't really be confusion. It's because of the great scandal that's taken place, isn't it? Because of what's happened in the past and how post offices have used Horizon data to oppress sub-postmasters. That's why things have changed.
And things have changed. So my opinion is that how we support and review discrepancies with postmasters now is not the same as how we did in the past, which was awful. So I don't see the data being called into question because of the processes that we follow to assure ourselves. But I do understand, I think we'd get that external assurance would help everyone in this conversation.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask if I have any more questions for you. No, I haven't. That's
Thank
all
you.
I have, sir.
Yeah. Ms. Ward?
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Ms.
Hello.
Park. We have this perennial issue of just being able to see each other. Thank you. It's just the location of the desks. Just want to ask you a couple of questions to check in with some of the matters you raise in your witness statement. And I'm asking questions on behalf of the NFSP. Sorry, I should have said that at the beginning. I'm not going to call up these documents. I'm just going to make some general summaries and ask you some questions. At paragraph 17 of your witness statement, you say in relation to the 12 postmaster policies, prior to submission to ARQ, that's the Audit and Risk Committee, each policy is reviewed and agreed with the National Federation of Postmasters, NFSP, with feedback also obtained from the Postmaster Experience Director, who is a serving postmaster working within the Post Office. One of Post Office's postmaster non-executive directors will also approve new policies as a core member of ARQ. In his witness statement, I'm not calling it up, but for the record, for the inquiry's record, WITN 0037000100, Callum Greenhow of the NFSP says at paragraph 326 that the NFSP raised concerns about the audit reporting script, suggested an alternative script. He also says that the NFSP suggested a checklist for the postmaster and the officer in charge to follow, given the potential stressful situation that may be being dealt with at the time. But he says these suggestions were rejected by the Post Office. So the first question I wanted to ask you was, would you agree that the policies you've been referring to are therefore reviewed by the NFSP, but are not always agreed in full by them, and that changes proposed by the NFSP are not always taken on board?
I couldn't comment on that because that's not part of the process that I'm accountable for.
Okay. It might be the following question you can't answer either, and that's fine, just say if you can't. But in that paragraph 17 of your witness statement, where you are setting all of this out, you list 3 potential sources of postmaster feedback on Post Office policies. That's the Postmaster Experience Director, the Postmaster Non-Executive Director, and the NFSP. So if I think about an example, so you've got 3 different sources of feedback and approval. Let's say, for example, the Postmaster Experience Director agrees with the policy that's being brought forward, but the NFSP and the Postmaster Non-Executive Directors don't agree in full with it. Is it the case that the agreement of the Postmaster Experience Director allows the Post Office to say they've received postmaster feedback and approve the policy?
Again, because I'm not accountable for that review process, I'm sorry, I can't comment.
Okay. I think just picking up on that, the this may also not be, just you can tell me if it's not, but that would you agree that what I've just described actually suggests that the Post Office effectively has a number of bites at the cherry to get the answer it needs on approval?
Again, I can't comment.
Okay. At paragraph 80 and 81 of your witness statement, you discuss the Operational Excellence Project. Is that something that you are familiar with?
That's something I am familiar with,
Okay.
yes.
And you say the objective of the policy is to review and improve the operational support provided to postmasters during each stage of their journey with the Post Office.
Absolutely.
And you have a number of sub-paragraphs in that, but sub-paragraph 81D is about operational excellence incentive to encourage improvements in back-office processes in sub-post office. And you talk about a financial incentive for the sub-postmaster meeting targets on, for example, daily cash declarations and completing monthly trading within a certain period. And that financial incentive is a payment of 5% of the postmaster's total variable remuneration for the month. Now, I wanted to ask if you were aware that the NFSP did not agree that 5% of a postmaster's total variable remuneration was sufficient.
So, whilst I have responsibility for the overall operational excellence programme, postmaster remuneration isn't part of my accountabilities, and that sits with a member of the retail leadership team.
So you're not aware specifically of the NFSP. However, I think you said earlier you were an accountant, if that's correct. So
yes.
Perhaps you might be able to comment on my follow-up questions. Would you agree that it is not sufficient when postmasters, 5% of this remuneration is not sufficient when postmasters across the UK report in the NFSP surveys and the postmaster surveys, or the Post Office surveys and the YouGov survey for this inquiry, that low remuneration is the biggest issue they face, and that 5% of not very much is in fact not very much?
I understand the feedback about low remuneration, absolutely. With relation to the operational excellence incentive, my understanding was that 5% wasn't intended to cover the full costs of all of those back office processes. My understanding is there's an element of the admin process fed into each of the individual REM payments for the products. And this was simply a way to encourage postmasters to complete the back office processes that we asked them to do as part of the contract and running their branches. But I understand the feedback about the REM in general. Yeah.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Ms. Watt. Is that it, Mr. Stevens?
Yes, sir, that is it.
Well, then, thank you very much, Ms. Park, for making a witness statement on behalf of the Post Office, which is very detailed. And thank you very much for expanding upon it in your oral evidence this afternoon. I'm grateful to you.
Thank you, sir.
Right, we'll resume again at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Yes, sir. Thank you.